Call whoever you want. He laughed, leaning back in his leather chair like he owned the night, the building, and her. She dialed anyway, put it on speaker, and when the voice on the other end said her name, the color drained from his face before the name was even spoken. Because the man answering wasn't a lawyer, wasn't the police. It was Teaobaldo Avila, and he was already on his way. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. The office was dim. One lamp burning amber in the corner. The city beyond the windows dark and indifferent. A desk between them wide, polished. The kind of desk that exists to remind people of distance. Anderson Tales sat behind it. White shirt, untucked at one side. Dark tie loosened at the collar like the evening had already exhausted him, though the only thing he had done tonight was wait for her. He was leaned back in his leather chair with the ease of a man who had never once questioned whether a room belonged to him. His watch caught the lamplight when he moved. He let it. Ashley stood on the other side. She still had her apron on. Dark fabric, slightly dusty at the hem from the kitchen pass. Her order pad tucked at her waist habit. Even now, even here. Her hair was pulled back the way she always wore it for a double shift, a few loose strands fallen across her face. She hadn't fixed them. There hadn't seemed to be a point. She had come for her pay. That was all. That was the entire reason she was standing in this office at 11:40 at night, instead of on a bus going home to a apartment that still smelled like the candle she'd burned down to nothing 2 weeks ago, trying to make the place feel less cold. She needed her money. You're not getting paid this month. He said it the way you say the weather. Flat, certain, already bored by it. Ashley looked at him. For what reason? Not a question. She was too tired for the inflection. Anderson tilted his head slightly, like she'd said something almost amusing. He picked up the pen on his desk, turned it once between his fingers, set it back down. You know the reason. She did not move. She had learned, across 5 months of this, that movement was information, that flinching told him something, that stepping back told him more. So she stood exactly where she was, in her dusty apron, with her order pad at her hip, and she looked at him without expression. I don't, she said. Explain it to me. Something shifted in his face then. The amusement sharpened. He stood slowly, the way men stand when they want the standing itself to mean something, and walked around the side of his desk. Not toward her. Not quite. Just around. Repositioning. Closing the geometry of the room. His voice dropped. You give me what I've been asking for, right here, tonight. And maybe I reconsider the whole month. The air in the room changed quality. It got thicker. Ashley felt her stomach drop the way it always dropped in this office, a cold, fast plunge, and then she felt something else move through her underneath it. Something that had been quiet for 5 months and was no longer interested in being quiet. No, she said. Simple. The same answer she had given him the first time, he asked. The same answer she had given him every time since. His expression hardened. The softness false as it was left his face entirely. Then you get nothing. He walked back to his chair, settled into it, spread his hands open on the desk. And you can call whoever you want. Ashley didn't respond. Police? He gestured loosely. I'll tell them you've been stealing from the register. We've had discrepancies. A pause. Lawyer? I'll have mine bury it in paperwork until you can't afford to keep paying yours. He leaned back. Union? There is no union here, sweetheart. You signed the contractor agreement on your first day, remember? He let all of it land. Then he laughed. Not a sharp laugh. Not cruel, exactly. Almost warm, the laugh of a man genuinely entertained. He leaned back further in his chair, one hand resting on the armrest, and he laughed at the apron and the order pad and the loose strands of hair and the fact that she was still standing there. Call whoever you want. Before that laugh, there were 5 months. That is the part of this story that matters. The part Anderson Tales had never thought to learn. Because learning it would have required him to see her as something other than a problem he could simply outlast. He didn't know about month 1 when she had filed a formal complaint with the shift manager. 2 paragraphs, specific dates, specific incidents. The complaint was acknowledged by email. Automated. Followed by nothing. He didn't know about month 2 when she approached the only other senior female staff member, a woman named Patricia who had worked the floor for 6 years. Patricia had listened, made sympathetic sounds. By the next morning, Ashley's Friday and Saturday shifts, her highest-earning nights, had been quietly reassigned. He didn't know about month 3, the free consultation with a labor attorney in an office above a dry cleaner 4 streets over. The attorney was kind. He explained, gently, that without sustained documentation and a pattern of formal refusals on record, her case would be expensive, slow, and uncertain. He wished her luck. She thanked him and walked back to work. He didn't know about months 4 and 5, the silence. Not the silence of acceptance, the silence of a woman calculating, enduring, adding everything to a private ledger inside herself, waiting for a door that never opened. She had tried every decent door. That was the kind of woman she was, and now she was here. 11:40 at night. Apron on, the lamp burning amber. Anderson, still smiling from his own laugh, relaxed in his chair like this was already over. Ashley's hand moved to her apron pocket. Not the order pad, the other side. A small card, folded once, that she had kept there for exactly 31 days without ever intending to use it. A name written in clean, spare ink. A number beneath it. And below that, one quiet line she had read so many times the fold had started to soften. If anyone ever makes you unsafe, call me. Her thumb found the edge of it. Anderson watched her reach for her phone and felt the particular pleasure of a man who is certain of the ending. He did not know about the card. He did not know about the man. He did not know that 31 days earlier, in this same restaurant, a pair of calm, dark eyes had watched him watch her across the dining room and had already taken note. Ashley dialed. Anderson laughed again, softer this time, shaking his head like she was a child doing something endearingly foolish. The call connected. One word came through. Her name. That was all, just her name. But the voice that carried it was so controlled, so utterly unhurried, that the laugh died in Anderson's throat before he even understood why. 8 months earlier, Ashley Cole almost didn't take the job. She had stood outside Tails and Ember for 4 minutes before walking in. She remembered because she had counted. The kind of counting you do when your body knows something your mind hasn't admitted yet. The restaurant looked expensive from the outside. Warm lighting behind tall windows. The kind of place where the menu had no prices on the version they handed women. She had needed that not to matter. So she straightened her collar, picked up her bag, and walked through the door. The interview lasted 11 minutes. A woman from HR named Donna, efficient and pleasant, explained the contractor terms, the shift structure, the dress code, plain shirt, dark apron, hair back. She slid the paperwork across, and Ashley signed where indicated without asking too many questions, because she had learned, by then, that asking too many questions in an interview was how you lost jobs you needed. She needed this one. The numbers were simple and brutal. 3 months behind on rent. Her mother's prescription costs had doubled since the insurance lapsed. Her younger sister, Renee, was in her 2nd year of community college on a schedule that only worked if Ashley kept covering the gap. The figures did not leave room for pride about which door she walked through. Donna shook her hand and said, "You can start Thursday." Ashley smiled and said, "Thank you. I'll be here." She was 30 minutes early. She was good at the work. That was never the question. Ashley had been waitressing on and off since she was 19. She knew how to read a table, how to time a refill before the glass looked empty, how to be warm without being familiar. She learned the menu in 2 days. She learned the kitchen staff's rhythms in 4. By her 2nd week, the regulars were asking for her section. The other servers noticed. Most of them nodded with something close to respect. A few, the ones who had been there long enough to know certain things, watched her a little more carefully, not with jealousy, with something quieter than that. A woman named Gloria, mid-40s, had worked the floor for 3 years, had pulled her aside one afternoon near the staff lockers, not dramatically, just paused beside her and said, low, while folding her apron, "Keep your shifts professional. Don't stay after close if you can help it. And if he asks you to come to the office, find a reason not to." Ashley had looked at her. "He?" she said. Gloria glanced once toward the hallway that led to management, then back. "Just keep it in mind," she said, and walked away. Ashley had filed it somewhere and kept working. She saw Anderson Tails properly for the first time at the end of her 1st week. He came through the dining room on a Thursday evening not to greet customers, not to manage anything visible, just moving through the space the way owners move through spaces they consider extensions of themselves. Dark trousers, white shirt with the collar open, one button too many for a man his age. A watch that picked up light from every direction. He was handsome in the way that certain men are handsome when they have money, not genuinely, but convincingly. He paused at the edge of her section. She was clearing a foretop. She felt the pause before she saw it. The particular quality of being watched, not glanced at. Watched landed on the back of her neck like a change in temperature. She looked up. He smiled. Easy. Practiced. New? He said. Yes, Ashley. Started Thursday. I know. Still smiling. You're doing well. She thanked him and went back to clearing the table. She told herself it was nothing. Owners noticed new staff. That was normal. The smile was just managerial. The pause was just assessment. She told herself these things and mostly believed them. By the end of the second week, she stopped believing. It started small. The way these things always start small. Small enough that when you try to describe them to someone later, you can hear yourself sounding uncertain, unreliable, like maybe you misread it. A hand on her shoulder that stayed 2 seconds too long. You look tired today. You should rest better. I worry about my staff. A request to stay 15 minutes after her shift to go over feedback. Feedback that turned out to be him sitting on the edge of his desk, telling her she had natural warmth and that the restaurant needed more of it. The first time he asked her to stay late privately, she said she had somewhere to be. She didn't have anywhere to be. She went home and sat in her kitchen and ate cereal and stared at the far wall. The second time, she said she wasn't feeling well. The third time, she looked him directly in the eye and said, calmly, that she preferred to keep things professional. The smile didn't waver. He nodded like she'd said something reasonable and walked away. The following Monday, her weekend shifts disappeared from the schedule. No explanation. No conversation. When she asked Donna in HR about it, Donna looked briefly uncomfortable and said scheduling was at management's discretion and that things shifted based on performance needs. Ashley's performance had not changed. She knew it. Donna knew it. The kitchen staff knew it. She applied for 2 other positions that week. One didn't respond. One offered half the hourly rate. She did the math against her rent, her mother's prescriptions, Renee's tuition gap, and put her phone face down on the kitchen table. She went back to work on Tuesday. Gloria caught her eye across the dining room floor that evening, just briefly. No words. The look said, "Now you understand." Ashley looked away first, picked up 2 plates from the pass, carried them to a table of 4 who were laughing about something, the easy, loud laughter of people having a pleasant evening, people who had not spent their lunch break doing arithmetic about survival. She set the plates down carefully, smiled, asked if they needed anything else. They didn't. She walked back to the kitchen. She did not cry until she was home, door locked, apron folded on the chair by the entrance, the same chair where she'd set her bag on her very first Thursday, 30 minutes early, full of the particular hope that comes from having no other options. That hope was still there, smaller now. But still there. She was going to need it. He came in on a Wednesday. That detail stayed with Ashley afterward, not the night itself, not what was said, but the ordinariness of the day it happened. Wednesday, midweek. The dining room at Tails and Ember was running at about 2/3 capacity, the kind of evening where the kitchen wasn't overwhelmed but wasn't idle either. Background music at the right volume, candles doing what candles do. She was refilling water at a corner two-top when the door opened. She didn't look up immediately. Doors opened constantly, but the room changed not loudly, not all at once, just a subtle shift in atmosphere, the way a room changes when something enters it that the room wasn't entirely prepared for. She looked up. 3 men. Walking in with the kind of unhurried certainty that doesn't require space to be cleared, but finds it cleared anyway. 2 of them slightly behind, broad, quiet eyes moving across the room with professional patience. The one in front. Black suit, no tie. The collar of his shirt open just enough to show the beginning of ink that ran up his neck dark. Deliberate lines of tattooing that continued down both hands, visible when he moved. He wasn't tall in a way that demanded attention. He was still in a way that commanded it. His hair was dark, swept back, neat. A small scar sat above his right eyebrow, pale and old. A thing that had healed long ago and been kept ever since, like a quiet fact about who he was. He scanned the room once, not like a man looking for a table, like a man confirming what he already suspected. The host seated them in Ashley's section. Of course he did. She gave herself exactly 3 seconds outside the kitchen pass. 3 seconds to register the table, note the body language, calibrate her approach. She had learned early that every table had a temperature before you arrived at it: nervous energy, anniversary softness, business tension, and that reading it correctly in the first 10 steps was most of the job. This table's temperature was controlled, not cold, not hostile, just contained. Like the 3 men had arrived with everything already decided and required very little from the evening except that it proceed without incident. She approached, set down the menus, made brief, professional eye contact with each of them. He looked at her when she reached his side of the table. Not the way Anderson looked at her, not with that particular inventory quality, that tallying look she had learned to recognize and brace for. This was different, observational, like he was noting something without having decided yet what to do with the information. "Good evening," she said. "Can I start you with water?" "Please," he said. His voice was low, unhurried, the single word carrying enough weight that she felt the 2 men beside him marginally relax at the sound of it. She took their drink orders and left. She served their table the way she served every table, professionally, attentively, without excess warmth or manufactured familiarity. The 2 associates ordered efficiently. He ordered simply steak, medium, nothing added or modified, the order of a man who decided what he wanted and did not second-guess it. He didn't speak much during the meal. The associates talked quietly between themselves, low conversation she didn't try to hear. He listened more than he spoke, ate without looking at his phone. When she came to refill his water a second time, he said thank you without being prompted, which she noted because it was rarer than it should have been in a restaurant at this price point. It was a quiet table, good table, the kind you were grateful for on a Wednesday. She was clearing the adjacent section when it happened. She hadn't slept properly the night before. Her mother had called twice. The pharmacy had flagged a problem with the refill, something administrative, something that needed to be resolved before the weekend. Ashley had been on hold for 40 minutes before the line disconnected. She had called back, been put on hold again, eventually gotten through to someone who told her it would be sorted by Friday. Maybe. She had gone to bed at 1 a.m. with a headache behind her eyes that the sleep hadn't entirely cleared. She'd been holding the remains of it all shift behind her professionalism, behind her careful warmth, behind the smile she had become expert at maintaining. She thought it was invisible. It wasn't. She was reaching across to collect a side plate when she heard his voice, quiet, directed, close enough that it was clearly intended for her. "Why are you crying?" She straightened immediately, touched the corner of her eye with one finger. She hadn't even felt it start, just one. Just the pressure of the evening finding the one small gap in her composure. She looked at him. He was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on a customer before. Not pity, not discomfort, not the particular awkwardness of someone who had noticed something inconvenient and wished they hadn't. Just attention. Genuine, unhurried attention. Like her answer actually mattered to him. "Family issue," she said, smiled. "I'll be fine." He held her gaze for a moment. Not pressing. Not pulling at the answer to see if it would unravel. He simply nodded. "All right," he said, and went back to his coffee. She brought the bill 20 minutes later, processed the card, returned with the receipt. When she collected the folder from the table after they left, she found the tip first generous, set in cash beside the receipt, more than the bill warranted. She found the card second. Small, cream-colored, heavy stock, just a name and a number, nothing else, no title, no company, no explanation of who he was, or what he did, or why any of it should matter to her, just the name. And below the number, written in pen not printed, written, in handwriting that was careful and unhurried like everything else about him. "If anyone ever makes you unsafe, call me." She stood at that table for a moment longer than she needed to. Around her, the restaurant continued its Wednesday evening. Glasses refilling, cutlery landing softly. Somewhere behind her, Anderson's office door was closed, the way it was always closed at this hour. She folded the card once, slipped it into the pocket of her apron, the left side, opposite the order pad. She told herself she would throw it away when she got home. She didn't throw it away. She didn't know yet why she couldn't. But somewhere underneath the exhaustion and the headache and the weight of the month's arithmetic, something in her had recognized something in those calm, dark eyes. Not safety, exactly. Something older than safety. The knowledge that certain people exist in the world who make predators recalculate. She went back to work. The card stayed in the apron. Then it moved to her bag. Then, the following morning, to the pocket of the next apron. Every shift after that, for 31 days. It didn't happen all at once. That was the thing about Anderson's particular kind of cruelty. It was patient, architectural, built slowly enough that each new piece could be explained away individually, dismissed as coincidence or policy or her own misreading of the situation. It was designed to make her doubt the pattern even as she was living inside it. And for a while, it worked. Month 3 began with the payslip. Ashley opened it on a Tuesday evening at her kitchen table, under the single overhead light that flickered slightly when the refrigerator cycled on. She read the figure twice, then a third time, with her finger tracing the line. $40 short. There was a note in the deduction column. 2 words. Service penalty. She had never received a service penalty before. She had never been told what a service penalty was, what triggered it, or how it was calculated. The staff handbook, which she had actually read, cover to cover, on her second night, mentioned it in one sentence without definition. She went to Donna in HR the next morning. Donna pulled up her file with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. "It's a management discretion deduction," she said, "for service quality issues." "What service quality issues?" Ashley asked. "I've had no complaints." "It's at management's discretion," Donna said again, gently, apologetically, in the way of someone who understood exactly what was happening and had also decided, a long time ago, that understanding it was the limit of what they were prepared to do. Ashley thanked her and left. The following month, the deduction was $60. The month after that, it was $90. The shift reductions came next. By month 4, she had lost her 2 weekend evening slots, her highest earning shifts, and gained 2 Tuesday lunches in their place. The math was not subtle. Weekend evenings at Tails and Ember meant business clientele, larger tables, longer sittings, generous tips from people loosened by good wine and good moods. Tuesday lunches meant quick turnovers, modest bills, and the particular frugality of people spending their own money rather than their company's. Her monthly take-home dropped by nearly a third. She adjusted. Quietly, the way she had been adjusting her entire adult life, moving things around, cutting other things out, finding the smaller version of every expense. She stopped buying the good coffee. She walked instead of taking the bus on the shorter routes. She moved her mother's prescription pickup to the cheaper pharmacy across town, the one that required 2 trains and an extra 40 minutes each way. Renee called one evening and asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," Ashley said. "Just a slow month. You sound tired." "I'm always tired. I'm a waitress." Renee laughed. Ashley laughed with her. After they hung up, she sat in the quiet of her apartment for a long time without moving. The public humiliation was the part she hadn't anticipated. The salary cuts she could track, the shift reductions she could document. But this was shapeless, harder to hold, designed specifically to be dismissed as management. It began with small corrections made loudly. Anderson passing through her section during service and pausing to rearrange a placement she had already set correctly, not because it was wrong, but because the pause itself sent a message to anyone watching. Then, customers being quietly redirected. She would greet a table, take their drink order, disappear to the kitchen, and return to find them transferred to another server. No explanation offered to her. If the customers noticed, they said nothing. She was left holding a water jug in the middle of a dining room, recalibrating. Then, the whisper campaign. She became aware of it the way you become aware of a smell gradually, then all at once. A regular who had always requested her section suddenly didn't. A table of 4, who had left glowing reviews of her service, stopped coming in entirely. One evening, she overheard a fragment of conversation between the host and a waiting party. Something about Ashley being difficult, and the word landed in her chest like a stone. Difficult. She had never raised her voice, never argued publicly, never done anything except refuse, quietly and repeatedly, the thing he had asked for. But difficulty, she was learning, was not about behavior. It was about compliance, and she had not complied. Gloria found her in the staff room one evening in month 5. Ashley was sitting on the bench by the lockers, still in her apron, not doing anything, not on her phone, not eating, just sitting in the 10-minute gap before the evening rush with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the middle distance. Gloria sat beside her without asking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You filed the complaint," Gloria said finally. "Not a question." "Month 2, Ashley said. Gloria nodded slowly. "I filed one too. My second year." A pause. Nothing happened. Ashley looked at her. "How long have you let it go on?" Gloria asked. 5 months. Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why are you still here?" The answer was simple and terrible, and Ashley gave it without drama. Rent, my mother's medication, my sister's tuition gap, a breath. I did the math. I can't afford to leave. Gloria looked at her hands, then back up. He knows that, she said softly. That's why you. Ashley had suspected it. Hearing it said aloud by someone who had watched him long enough to know his patterns that landed differently, not as a revelation, as a confirmation. She was not a coincidence. She had been selected. She went home that night to a rent overdue notice slipped under her door. She picked it up. Read it. Set it on the kitchen table, next to the half-eaten meal she hadn't finished, and the phone with 3 missed calls from the debt collection agency, and the small pile of papers she kept in a folder marked, in her own handwriting, just in case. She sat down, opened the folder. Inside, near the back, behind the payslips with their growing deductions, was a small cream-colored card, folded once. She didn't take it out. She just knew it was there. She closed the folder, turned off the kitchen light, and told herself, for the 23rd time, that she wasn't going to use it. She was still telling herself that when she fell asleep, the shift ended at 11. Ashley knew something was different by 9. It wasn't anything she could point to specifically. Not a word said. Not a look held too long. Just a texture in the evening that felt wrong. Anderson had been in the dining room more than usual, moving through it with a kind of patient deliberateness, checking things that didn't need checking. Twice she felt his eyes on her from across the room. Twice she looked up and found him already looking away. By 10:30, the dining room was nearly empty. The kitchen was winding down. The other servers were cashing out their sections, collecting their things, saying quiet goodnights to each other, the normal sounds of an evening closing. She was wiping down her last table when Donna appeared at her elbow. Anderson wants to see you before you leave, Donna said, not meeting her eyes. About your pay. Ashley's hands stopped moving on the table. She looked at Donna. Donna looked at the floor. Okay, Ashley said. She stood outside his office door for a moment before knocking. The hallway back here was different from the dining room. No warm lighting, no background music, no careful atmosphere management. Just a corridor with overhead fluorescents and the ambient sound of the kitchen extractors winding down. A fire exit at the far end with a small red sign above it. She noted the fire exit the way you note things when some quiet part of you is already preparing. She knocked. Come in. The office was dim. One lamp burning in the corner amber, warm, at odds with everything about the moment. His desk dominated the center of the room, wide, dark wood, the kind of desk purchased to establish something about its owner before a single word is spoken. Anderson was seated behind it, white shirt, untucked at the side, tie loosened, leaned back in his chair with the particular relaxation of a man who has been waiting and found the waiting easy. His watch caught the lamplight. He let it. He didn't stand when she entered. Close the door, he said. She closed it. Left her hand on the handle for 1 extra second, not pulling it back open, just maintaining the contact. Then she let go and turned to face him. Donna said this was about my pay, she said. It is. He gestured at the chair across the desk. Sit. She didn't sit. Something moved across his face, small, quickly controlled. He nodded once, like her standing was a minor inconvenience he had already accounted for. You're not getting paid this month, he said. The words arrived without preamble. Clean and flat, dropped into the room like something he'd been holding all evening and was finally setting down. Ashley kept her face exactly where it was. For what reason? She said. Accumulated service penalties. I've never received a formal warning. Not one. The deductions are the warning. That's not how warnings work. He tilted his head. That almost amused angle. Ashley. Her name in his mouth like something he owned. We've been having this slow conversation for 5 months now. I think you know what this is about. She said nothing. He stood. Not fast. Deliberately. The standing of a man who understood that verticality was a statement. He walked around the side of his desk, not toward her, not directly, just repositioning the way he always repositioned, adjusting the geometry of the room until it suited him. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. You're a good server. Genuinely. The customers like you. I like you. A pause. This doesn't have to be difficult. It isn't difficult, she said. I'd like my pay. The gentleness evaporated. You give me what I've been asking for, he said quietly. Right here. Tonight. And I reconsider the entire month. Maybe even the back months. The room contracted. Ashley felt her stomach drop that cold, familiar plunge, and beneath it, something else. Something that had been accumulating across 5 months of payslip deductions, and stolen shifts, and whispered words to customers, and HR non-answers and corridors with flickering lights. Something that had been quietly filling up like a cistern, patient and dark, waiting for the moment it had nowhere left to go. "No," she said. One word. The same word she had given him every time before. But something in it was different now, not louder, not harder, just final. In a way it hadn't quite been previously, the sound of a door closing on a room she was never going back to. His expression didn't just harden. It emptied. He walked back to his chair, settled into it, spread his hands flat on the desk in front of him like he was smoothing something out. "Then you get nothing." His voice was almost bored. "And you can call whoever you want." She looked at him. "Police?" He leaned back. "Tell them you've been stealing from inventory. We've had it documented for 2 months in case." A pause for effect. "Lawyer? I'll have mine tied up until you can't pay yours anymore. Which, given your current financial situation, shouldn't take long." He said it without cruelty. "That was the worst part," he said it clinically. "The way you read from a spreadsheet. Union? You signed a contractor agreement. You remember that." He let every exit close in sequence. Then he laughed. Warm. Almost fond. Leaned back in his chair with one hand resting on the armrest and laughed at the apron and the order pad, and the woman in front of him, who had tried every decent door, and run out of doors. "Call whoever you want, sweetheart." He thought she had no one. Her hand moved to her apron pocket. Not the order pad side, the other side. 31 days she had carried the card without using it. 31 days of telling herself she didn't want to involve him, didn't want to owe anyone, didn't want to reach for a hand that came attached to a world she had deliberately kept herself away from. 31 days. Her fingers found the edge of the card. The card found her fingers. Anderson was still smiling when she pulled out her phone. He watched with the relaxed curiosity of a man watching someone do something he considers pointless. "Who are you calling?" he said, half entertained. She didn't answer. She unfolded the card, dialed the number, put the phone to her ear. Anderson leaned forward slightly, elbows on the desk, still smiling, waiting for whoever was about to tell her they couldn't help her. The line rang twice. Then it connected. And the voice that came through low, unhurried, carrying its own particular weight across the silence of the room, said one word, her name, just her name. But the way it arrived calm, immediate, certain made Anderson's smile do something it had never done before in this office. It faltered. The room held its breath. Ashley held hers. On the other end of the line, 1 ring, 2, and then the connection opened, with the quiet certainty of a door that had been expecting to be knocked on. Not voicemail, not a groggy pause, just immediate, clean presence. Ashley, her name, just her name. But it arrived the way very few words ever arrive with the full weight of someone who meant it, who had, in some quiet way she didn't entirely understand, been waiting for it. She exhaled once, steadied herself. "I'm sorry to call this late," she said. "Don't apologize." A pause brief, assessing. What's happened? Not what's wrong. Not are you okay? What's happened? The question of a man who had already moved past the preamble and needed only the facts to begin. She glanced at Anderson. He was leaned forward now, elbows on the desk, the smile still present but reconfigured, less certain of itself, recalculating. He thought he knew what this was. A friend, a relative, someone who would listen sympathetically and be entirely unable to do anything. He was still comfortable. She kept her voice level. "My employer has refused to pay me," she said. "He says unless I..." She paused, choosing the words carefully. "Unless I give him something I've refused to give him. For 5 months." Silence on the line. The particular silence of someone who has heard what you have said and is now deciding what it means for the person who said it to him. Then, "Put me on speaker." She lowered the phone, pressed the button, set it on the edge of the desk between them in the space where the lamp threw its amber light, where Anderson's hands rested flat on the dark wood. Anderson looked at the phone, looked at her, felt the room shift in some way he couldn't name yet but registered instinctively, the way certain animals register changes in air pressure before they understand the weather coming. His hand moved toward the phone. Ashley didn't stop him. He picked it up with the easy confidence of a man who had never once in his professional life been on the wrong end of a phone call, who had made enough of them to lawyers, to city officials, to people who owed him favors to know exactly what power sounded like when it spoke first. "This is Anderson Tales," he said. The voice he used for these moments measured, slightly bored, the voice of a man who owns the room he's standing in. "And who exactly are you?" A pause. Not long. 3 seconds, perhaps 4. But the kind of pause that has texture that isn't empty but full. The way the moment before a storm makes the air feel dense. Then the voice replied, "Teaobaldo Avila." The name landed in the room like something physical. Ashley watched it happen. She watched the exact moment Anderson Tales, who had laughed 40 seconds ago, who had listed her legal options like a man reading a menu, who had leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone who had already won. She watched the moment he heard that name and felt the world reorganize itself around him. It wasn't dramatic. That was the thing. It would have been almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. A slight change in the set of his jaw, a fractional stillness in his hands, his eyes moving just briefly, just once to the office door behind her, as though checking the distance. The color in his face didn't drain all at once. It left quietly, like a tide going out. Anderson knew that name. Ashley understood this in real time, watching his face do its careful, failing work of composure. She didn't know yet the full architecture of what that name meant in the city's particular hierarchy, the legitimate businesses above and the other structures beneath. The men who moved through both worlds with the fluency of someone born in the space between them. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew what she was watching. She was watching a man who had spent 5 months making her feel like she had no one discover that she had someone he had not accounted for. Anderson's mouth opened, closed. He set the phone back on the desk with a care he hadn't bothered to use when he'd picked it up. On the speaker, the line was still open, still breathing. Anderson started, stopped, reconfigured. "There's been a misunderstanding here. This is a private employment matter." "I'm not talking to you," Teaobaldo said. Simple, not hostile. Just a statement of fact, clean as a line drawn in clean ink. A beat of silence, then, directed at Ashley. "Tell me the amount he owes you." She had done this math so many times the numbers came without effort. 5 months of deductions, she said. 40, 60, 90, 90, 110. Plus this month's full salary withheld. "And what is your monthly salary?" she told him. She heard nothing on the line for a moment. Just the ambient sound of wherever he was, a room, quiet, somewhere in the city, the low background texture of a night that had been going differently before this call arrived. "Is he in front of you now?" Teaobaldo asked. "Yes." "Is the door closed?" "Yes." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was exactly the same temperature it had been from the first word, controlled, unhurried, carrying its weight without raising itself. "I'm on my way." 3 words. The call ended. The office held the silence of those 3 words for a long moment. Ashley picked up the phone from the desk, slipped it into her apron pocket, straightened. Anderson was still standing behind his desk. He hadn't moved since he'd set the phone down. His hands were still flat on the dark wood, and she could see now, for the first time across 5 months of this, that they were not entirely steady. He opened his mouth. She spoke first. "You should probably call your lawyer," she said quietly. "You said it would take time. You might want to start now." Anderson said nothing. She moved to the chair beside the door, not leaving, just repositioning, and sat down to wait. For the first time in 5 months, she was the one who was comfortable in this room, and Anderson Tales' loosened tie, expensive watch, leather chair stood behind his desk in the amber lamplight and understood, with the particular clarity of a man who has just heard 3 words spoken in a certain voice, that the ending he had been certain of 20 minutes ago was no longer the ending. Something was coming, and there was nothing left to do but wait for it. The clock on Anderson's office wall read 11:52. Ashley knew because she looked at it when she sat down. Then she stopped looking at it, because watching a clock in a room like this with a man like him standing behind his desk doing his quiet, failing work of composure felt like giving something away. She looked at her hands instead. They had stopped trembling somewhere between the end of the call and now. She wasn't sure exactly when, just noticed at some point that they were still, folded in her lap, the phone a solid weight in her apron pocket. Her breathing had steadied too, not because she wasn't afraid she was, in some low background way, the way you're afraid before something large and irreversible, but because the fear had found its proper size. It wasn't bigger than her anymore. That was new. Anderson moved first. He walked to the window behind his desk, not to look at anything specific, just to put distance between himself and the center of the room. He stood with his back to her for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights below. The city that had, until approximately 8 minutes ago, been a place where he understood exactly where he stood. He turned back around. "You don't know what you've done," he said. His voice was different now. The boardroom quality was gone, that measured, slightly bored authority he wore like the watch. What was underneath it was something she hadn't seen from him before. Not quite fear. Something adjacent. The particular unease of a man who has spent years operating in spaces where he controlled the information and has suddenly discovered that someone else has been holding information he didn't know existed. Ashley looked at him calmly. "I made a phone call," she said. "You told me to." He started to say something, stopped, walked back to his desk, picked up his own phone, dialed, held it to his ear, waited. Whoever he was calling didn't answer. He set the phone face down on the desk and didn't try again. Outside the office, the restaurant was finishing its close. Ashley could hear it through the door, the particular sounds of an evening ending. Chairs being lifted onto tables. The kitchen extractor fans cycling off one by one. The low conversation of the closing staff, relaxed and ordinary. The sounds of people who thought the night was almost over. She wondered briefly what they would make of the next 20 minutes. At 11:58, something changed in the corridor. She felt it before she heard it. A subtle shift in the ambient noise of the building, the way a crowd shifts when it becomes collectively aware of something without having been told. Voices dropping. Movement slowing. The particular hush of people who have noticed something and are deciding, all at once, whether to look. Then footsteps. The host's voice surprised, professionally attempting to manage the surprise. Then nothing. Anderson heard it too. He straightened behind his desk, adjusted his tie the first time all evening he'd touched it, and the gesture was so instinctive, so automatic, that she didn't think he was aware he'd done it. He squared his shoulders, reset his expression into something approaching authority. She watched him perform composure for an audience that hadn't arrived yet. Through the office door, muffled but unmistakable, the sound of the restaurant's front entrance opening. Not the soft pneumatic sigh it made during service when customers arrived in ones and twos. Something different. A more deliberate opening. The sound of a door held wide. Then, silence. The kind of silence that falls over a room when everyone in it has stopped what they were doing at the same moment. Ashley stood up from her chair. She didn't know why exactly. Some instinct, the same instinct that had kept her standing during this whole conversation, when Anderson had gestured for her to sit. Some understanding that for what was about to happen, she did not want to be found sitting down. She moved to stand beside the door. Anderson watched her do it. Said nothing. Outside, the silence held for 3 seconds. Then she heard footsteps. Not rushed. That was the first thing. The pace was completely unhurried. The footfall of someone who had never in their adult life needed to move quickly to establish that they had arrived. Measured. Even. The sound of absolute certainty expressed through the simple act of walking. 2 sets of footsteps behind the first. Slightly heavier, slightly wider apart. The staff in the dining room, she could imagine them. Could picture Gloria by the server station, cloth in hand, motionless. The kitchen porter who always propped the pass door open at close, watching through the gap. The host at the front, having already run out of professional responses to whatever he had just witnessed pull up outside. She had been in this restaurant for 8 months. She had carried things in this building: plates, glasses, trays, the accumulated weight of 5 months of deliberate punishment, and she had carried all of it without letting it show, without asking for help, without making it anyone else's problem. Because making it anyone else's problem required a trust she had stopped extending to people she couldn't afford to be wrong about. She had been wrong to carry it alone. She understood that now. Standing beside the door of this amber-lit office, while a man she had given a single card to 31 days ago walked through her place of work, with the particular unhurry of someone who had decided, before he left wherever he had been tonight, exactly how this was going to go. She had not wanted to call him. That was still true. But standing here steadier than she had been in months, the trembling gone. Her breathing, even she understood something about that reluctance that she hadn't quite seen clearly before. She hadn't wanted to call him because calling him meant admitting the size of what had been done to her. Meant letting someone see the full shape of it. Meant accepting that endurance alone was not going to be enough. She had been confusing dignity with silence. They were not the same thing. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Anderson straightened one final time. Lifted his chin, arranged his face into the expression of a man who was in control of his own building. A single knock, not loud, not aggressive, Just sufficient. Ashley looked at the door. Then at Anderson. Anderson looked at the door. His hand, the one resting on the desk, the one with the expensive watch, was not steady. The handle moved. The door opened slowly, not dramatically, not thrown wide, just opened with the same unhurried certainty that had characterized every footstep in the corridor, and then he was there. Teobaldo Avila, black suit, no tie, the collar of his shirt open at the throat, the ink of his tattoos visible along his neck and running down both hands, dark and deliberate against his skin. His hair was swept back, the small scar above his right eyebrow pale in the lamplight. His eyes moved across the room in one clean sweep, taking in the desk, the lamp, Anderson behind it, Ashley beside the door, and then settled. He didn't fill the doorway the way large men fill doorways. He simply made it clear, without any particular effort, that the doorway now belonged to him. 2 men behind him, broad, quiet, standing slightly back, not threatening, not posturing, just present in the way that certain men are present when their presence itself is the message. Teobaldo stepped inside. His eyes found Ashley first. Not Anderson, not the desk, not the room. Are you hurt? He said. The question was so direct, so absent of any performance, that it took her a half-second to process it. Not, "Are you okay?" the reflexive question people ask when they mean something vaguer. Are you hurt? Specific, medical. The question of someone who needed accurate information before proceeding. "No," she said. He nodded once. Then, and only then, he looked at Anderson. Anderson had prepared something. She could see the remnants of it in his posture, the set of his jaw, the way his hands had been arranged on the desk to project ownership of the surface they rested on. He had spent the 15 minutes constructing a version of himself that could receive this visit with authority intact. It lasted approximately 4 seconds under Teobaldo's gaze. "Mr. Avila." Anderson's voice came out almost right. "Almost. I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here. This is an internal employment matter, and I'm not sure what Ashley has told you, but—" Teobaldo raised one finger, not a gesture of anger, not a silencing slam on the desk or a step forward, or any of the theatrics that Anderson would have known how to respond to, because those were the theatrics of men operating at his level. Just one finger, raised slightly, with the economy of someone who has never needed more than that. Anderson stopped talking. The room went very quiet. Teobaldo walked to the chair across from Anderson's desk. The chair Ashley had refused to sit in, and sat down in it, slowly. As though the evening had provided him exactly the amount of time he required, and he intended to use all of it. He looked at Anderson across the desk. "She told me you owe her money," he said. 5 months of withheld salary plus this month in full. A pause. "Is that accurate?" Anderson's mouth worked. "There were performance deductions that—" "I didn't ask about deductions." Teobaldo's voice didn't rise. It never rose. It simply became more precise, the way a blade becomes more dangerous, the finer its edge. "I asked if the amount she described is accurate." Silence. "Is it accurate?" he said again. Anderson looked at Ashley, then back, then at the 2 men standing in his doorway, who had not moved and had not spoken, and whose stillness was its own kind of eloquence. "There may be amounts owed," Anderson said finally, quietly, "that are still being calculated." "Then calculate them now," Teobaldo said. "You have 5 minutes. Anderson didn't move for a moment. Then he opened his desk drawer. He began with the lies she had anticipated them, had steeled herself for them, but hearing them spoken aloud in front of someone else still landed differently than she'd expected. "She's been taking from inventory," Anderson said, not looking at Ashley. Addressing Teobaldo directly, with the urgency of a man who has decided his best remaining option is to make his case to the only person in the room whose opinion matters. "Small amounts, consistently. We have records. She's been difficult with customers. I have complaints on file. I've eaten at this restaurant," Teobaldo said, "for 2 years. Anderson stopped. "My table." Teobaldo's eyes were steady, unhurried, fixed on Anderson with the calm patience of someone who has already heard the ending of this sentence and is simply waiting for Anderson to catch up. "She has served my table. I have watched her work." A pause. "She doesn't steal." The word landed in the room and stayed there, "and I have not filed a complaint." He leaned forward very slightly. "If you produce one with my name on it, we will have a different conversation." Anderson's file stayed closed. "You have 4 minutes," Teobaldo said. Anderson went to his office safe. Ashley watched him cross the room, the man who had leaned back in his chair 40 minutes ago and laughed at her, who had listed her legal options like weapons in an inventory, who had said, "Call whoever you want," with the absolute confidence of someone who had already accounted for every possible response. His hands were shaking when he worked the combination. The safe opened. He reached inside, pulled out an envelope, then a second, then counted from a third. The room was so quiet that the sound of the counting was audible, the soft friction of bills being moved from one hand to another by fingers that couldn't quite hold their steadiness. He crossed back to the desk, set the envelope down. Teobaldo looked at it, then at Ashley. "Count it," he said. She crossed to the desk, picked up the envelope, counted carefully, the way she had been counting things her whole life: rent, prescriptions, tuition gaps, payslip deductions, with the focus of someone for whom numbers have always had real consequences. It was right. All of it. 5 months of deductions, the withheld salary, the full amount she had tracked in her own careful records, and never once been able to prove to anyone who could do something about it. "It's correct," she said. Teobaldo nodded, then looked at Anderson. "Give it to her directly," he said. Anderson picked up the envelope from the desk. He crossed to Ashley and placed it in her hands. She had imagined this moment in the abstract, in the way you imagine things you've stopped letting yourself want too clearly, and she had imagined feeling something large. Triumph, maybe, or the particular release of something long held finally being set down. What she actually felt was quieter than that. Just right. The simple, clean sensation of a thing being as it should be. After a very long time of it being wrong, she held the envelope. Anderson could not look at her. Teobaldo stood. He buttoned the single button of his jacket unhurried, precise, and then looked at Anderson with an expression that wasn't anger, and wasn't satisfaction, and wasn't anything that could be simply named. "If I hear her name come out of your mouth," he said, "in any context, to any person, for any reason," he glanced briefly toward the office window, toward the dining room beyond it, "my men will be outside this building by morning, and it will not open." Anderson nodded rapidly. "Yes, of course, absolutely." Teobaldo looked at him for one moment longer, the look of a man filing something away, permanently, for future reference. Then he turned to Ashley. The shift in his expression was not dramatic, but it was real, a slight softening around the eyes, something that had been held in restraint releasing just enough to be visible. "You mistook her silence for weakness," he said. He wasn't talking to her, he was talking to Anderson, but he was looking at her when he said it. And something about being seen that clearly by someone who owed her nothing, who had come here at midnight in a black suit because she had finally, after 31 days and 5 months, and a lifetime of carrying things alone, made a single phone call. Something about that undid a small, carefully maintained knot somewhere in her chest. She didn't cry, but it was close. Teobaldo moved toward the door, paused at the threshold. "Are you safe to get home?" he said, directed at her. Only her. "Yes," she said. He nodded, and walked out. The two men followed. The office door remained open behind them. Ashley stood in the amber lamplight, envelope in her hands, and listened to those unhurried footsteps move back through the dining room, through the silence of the staff, through the restaurant that had witnessed everything and would remember all of it, and out through the front door. Anderson didn't speak. There was nothing left for him to say. The dining room was frozen. That was the only word for it, frozen. The way a frame freezes when a film stops mid-motion. Every person caught in the attitude of whatever they'd been doing, when the 3 black SUVs had pulled up outside, and the front door had opened, and the evening had become something else entirely. Gloria was by the server station, cloth in hand, the kitchen porter in the past doorway, the host behind his stand, professionally attempting an expression of normalcy and not quite reaching it. 2 customers who had stayed for a final drink sat very still at their corner table, watching. Teobaldo walked through all of it without acknowledging any of it, not dismissively, not coldly, just with the complete self-containment of someone who had decided what this evening was about before he arrived, and had no remaining attention for anything peripheral. He reached the front of the restaurant, stopped, turned back to look at the room. His eyes moved across the staff, not threatening, not performing, just taking a slow, unhurried inventory of every face. The kind of look that says, "I have seen you. I will remember having seen you. Conduct yourselves accordingly." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then he walked to the door and held it open. Ashley stepped through first. Outside, the night air was cold and clean, in a way the office hadn't been. 3 black SUVs idled at the curb, their engines a low, continuous sound. A 4th man stood near the lead vehicle. He straightened slightly when Teobaldo appeared, then relaxed when Teobaldo gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Stand down," it resolved. The city moved around them, distant traffic, a siren somewhere northward, the ordinary, indifferent pulse of a night that had no idea what had just happened inside a restaurant on this block. Ashley stood on the pavement with the envelope in her hand. She was aware, suddenly, of how she must look. Apron still on. Order pad at her waist. Hair coming loose from the clip she'd put in 14 hours ago at the start of a double shift. The worn edges of the workday visible on every surface of her. She didn't try to fix any of it. Teobaldo stood beside her, looking out at the street. The lamplight from the restaurant window caught the ink along his hands, the pale line of the scar above his eyebrow. In profile, his face was utterly still. "You should have called earlier," he said, quietly, no accusation in it. "I know," she said. A pause. "Why didn't you?" She thought about the honest answer, about the HR complaint, and the labor attorney, and the 4 phone calls and all the decent doors. About the arithmetic of survival that had kept her in that building 5 months past the point where leaving would have been the rational choice. About the particular pride of a woman who has been handling things alone for so long that asking for help feels like a structural failure rather than a human right. "I didn't want to owe anyone," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You don't owe me anything," he said. She looked at him. "The card wasn't a transaction," he said. Simply, plainly. "It was a door. That's all." She looked back at the street, felt something shift in her chest. That knot again, the one that had come close to loosening in the office, and was now finishing the work. "He'll retaliate," she said. "When you're gone. When enough time passes and he recalculates." Teobaldo turned to look at her. "He won't." The certainty in his voice was not bravado. It wasn't the performed confidence of someone trying to reassure her. It was the flat, factual certainty of someone who understood the precise nature of the leverage in play and had no uncertainty about how it would hold. "He's a man who operates on the belief that he's the most dangerous thing in any room he walks into," Teobaldo said. "He was wrong about that tonight. He knows it now." A pause. "Men like that don't retaliate against reminders of their own limits. They avoid them." Ashley absorbed that. Then, "What if he lies? Tells people I stole? Damages my reference?" Teobaldo looked at her with something that was almost not quite, but almost a smile. Not warm exactly, just the expression of a man who finds a particular question straightforward. "Then I'll hear about it," he said. "And we'll have a different conversation with him." She believed him. That was the thing, she believed him completely. Not because he had performed certainty, but because everything about him, from the first moment he had walked into her section to the moment he had sat across from Anderson's desk, had been consistent. What he said and what he did occupied the same space. There was no gap between them. She had met very few people like that in her life. "There's a position," he said after a moment, "in one of my properties, legitimate front-of-house management. The woman running it is leaving at the end of the month." He paused. "It pays correctly. The owner doesn't visit after hours." Ashley looked at him. "Why?" she said. "Because you're good at the work," he said. "And you deserve to do it somewhere that doesn't cost you something every shift." She was quiet. Across 5 months, she had been offered nothing except the choice between compliance and punishment. The idea of something being offered simply because she had earned it without condition, without a cost she would discover later, sat in her chest, like something she had forgotten the shape of. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded, as though that was exactly the right answer, as though he hadn't expected anything more immediate, and wouldn't have respected it if she'd given it. One of the SUV doors opened. His associate stepped out, stood at the vehicle's side. Teobaldo turned to leave. "Thank you," Ashley said. He paused, looked back at her once. "You carried that alone for 5 months," he said. "That took more strength than anything that happened in that office tonight." He walked to the vehicle, got in. The door closed. The 3 SUVs pulled away from the curb with the same unhurried certainty he brought to everything. No acceleration, no drama, just a smooth departure into the ordinary city night. Ashley stood on the pavement outside Tails and Ember. Apron on. Envelope in hand, the cold air sharp against her face. She thought about 5 months, about the payslips and the HR complaint, and the labor attorney and Gloria's look across the dining room floor, about the card in her apron pocket for 31 days, about the moment she had finally dialed and heard her own name, returned to her in a voice that made the room change. She thought about what he had said. You carried that alone for 5 months. That took more strength than anything that happened in that office tonight. She had spent 5 months being told, in the architecture of every penalty and shift cut and closed door, that her endurance was weakness. That silence was surrender. That staying was desperation. It hadn't been any of those things. It had been a woman with nowhere to go making herself a way through. She untied her apron, folded it once, cleanly, the way she folded things, set it on the windowsill of Tails and Ember, and walked away from the building without looking back. She gave 2 weeks' notice the next morning. Not because she was required to, not because she owed Anderson Tails anything resembling professional courtesy, but because she had decided, somewhere on the walk home the previous night, that she was going to leave this place the same way she had survived it on her own terms, with her own dignity intact, in a way that could never be reframed as flight. She typed the resignation letter at her kitchen table before the sun was properly up, kept it brief, professional, thanked the establishment for the opportunity, provided her end date. She printed it at the library on Lama Street, the same library where she had once looked up labor attorney listings, and hand-delivered it to Donna in HR at 9:15. Donna took it, read it, looked at Ashley with an expression that had several things in it, none of which she said out loud. I'll process this, Donna said. Thank you, Ashley said. She went home and slept for 10 hours. The 2 weeks that followed had a different texture than any that had come before. Anderson did not come onto the floor. His office door, which had always been positioned to monitor the dining room, stayed closed during her shifts. His voice, which she had heard directing, correcting, performing authority across every surface of the restaurant for 8 months, was absent. The staff moved through the space with a looseness she hadn't noticed was missing until it returned. Gloria caught her on her second-to-last shift. They were both in the staff room, end of evening, and Gloria sat beside her on the bench by the lockers, the same bench, the same position, as that conversation in month 5 that had told Ashley what she already knew. He came in Monday morning, Gloria said quietly. Sat in his office for 4 hours, didn't call anyone in. Ashley said nothing. Patricia said he's been asking about insurance, the kind you get when you're closing a business. Ashley looked at her hands. She didn't feel triumph. She had examined herself for it and found something quieter instead, a low, settled sense that the machinery of consequence was doing its work, without her having to watch it do so. Are you going to be okay? Ashley asked. Here. Gloria looked at her steadily. He knows better now, she said. Who's paying attention? Ashley nodded. Take care of yourself, Gloria said. You too. On her final shift, the kitchen staff made her a meal. Not an organized thing, not announced or ceremonial. Just, at the end of the evening, the head chef set a plate at the corner of the pass and said, without looking at her, You should eat before you go. She sat on a stool at the kitchen pass and ate a proper meal for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, while the kitchen wound down around her extractors cycling off, surfaces being wiped, the comfortable noise of people finishing a shared thing. She thanked them individually. They received her thanks with the slightly awkward grace of people who don't do sentimentality easily, but had decided this warranted an exception. She walked out of Tails and Ember at 11:40, the same time, she realized, as the night she had made the call. She didn't set her apron on the windowsill this time. She took it home, folded it, put it in a drawer. Some things you keep not because you want to look at them, but because they are part of the story of how you became who you are. Teobaldo's associate called 4 days later. A woman named Iris, efficient and pleasant, who explained the position front of house management at a private dining establishment in the city's northern quarter. The hours, the salary, which was correct in a way that Ashley sat with for a moment after she heard it. The start date. Ashley asked 2 questions. The first, who she would report to. Iris, directly, the woman said. And above her, the property manager. Mr. Avila is an owner but not an operational presence. The second, whether the offer was contingent on anything beyond her professional performance. A brief pause on the line. Then, with something that might have been the edge of a smile in the voice, No, it's a job, Miss Cole. Just a job, she accepted. She saw Teobaldo once more before she started. Not arranged, she was walking through the northern quarter 2 days before her start date, familiarizing herself with the area, the routes, the nearest pharmacy for her mother's prescription. the nearest coffee that wasn't too expensive. She turned a corner and he was there, coming out of a building with one associate, mid-conversation, unhurried as always. He saw her. Stopped. Miss Cole. Mr. Avila. A brief pause. The city moved around them. You look different, he said. She thought about that, about what was different, whether it was visible from the outside or just something she carried differently now. The weight that had been redistributed, the silence that had a different quality, chosen now rather than imposed. I slept, she said. Something shifted briefly in his expression, not quite a smile. Warmer than his default. There and gone. Good, he said. His associate murmured something. He glanced over, then back at her. You'll be well placed there, he said. The staff are good. The work is straightforward. I didn't want to call you, she said. It came out simply, without drama, just a thing that was true that she wanted him to know she knew. He looked at her. I know, he said. That's why I came. He nodded once. His associate opened the car door. He got in, and somewhere in that city, in a dim office with an amber lamp and a wide dark desk, a man who had once leaned back in his chair and laughed, now answered every phone call carefully, checked the name before he spoke, measured his words before he delivered them, and understood, with the permanent clarity of a lesson learned at the right cost, that silence in a person is not the same as the absence of power. Sometimes it is precisely the opposite. Ashley Cole walked to the end of the block, turned north, and kept going. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.